I want to say welcome and thank you for watching the video on how to prepare for park readiness. Um, there's been several things that have been presented at the teacher leader meetings, and with there being very little time to represent the materials, I thought a great idea would be for me to just re-record myself and kind of a mini presentation of some of the resources that I've seen. One of the things that I saw recently this past Thursday of last week was a presentation over the evidence tables that have to do with park and I guess are preparing for park and the Common Core assessment that's coming. Not really sure if high school is going to give it. I think everybody's under the assumption that it may not show up, but it never hurts to still know what's out there just in case we may actually have to do it. So I thought one of my responsibilities as a teacher leader would be to share the knowledge, which, from what I've seen, most of the materials have been presented from grades 3 through 8, which is who's going to be testing this year. So there hasn't been very much information for high school. So we've been kind of left not in the dark, but kind of off to the side because we haven't been given the priority because we may or may not be given that test. So with that said, I thought I'd share information just in case anyways. And for most of you, you like to be caught up with changes that are taking place. So I'm just kind of be brief with it. And this is my first video with hopefully many more to come. There may be some mistakes in what I say, there may not be, but for the most part, I'm trying to show you where most of the materials are and what's out there at your disposal. So it's up to you to kind of do your research. Hopefully you have over the summer, or if you have some spare time this semester, you can use it to help you prepare. Okay. Um, One of the things that I saw, and I'm going to email all of the information that I have. If most of this will be catered towards Algebra 1, but if there's anything else for Geometry or Algebra 2, just send me an email if I don't send it for you, and I'll see if I can find it. This PowerPoint here is a presentation that was given on the evidence tables that kind of gives an idea of what they are and how they should be catering towards our instruction. Our in-service on February the 13th, I'm pretty sure that they're probably going to represent this there, but I thought you guys would want to get a heads up as far as just kind of preparing so that you're not there getting information for the first time. This was previously discussed. I presented it before at the beginning of the year, but with that being so long ago and there being so many breakdowns in between, I thought it would be a great idea to start here talking about the evidence tables. Let's see. So one of the objectives of this PowerPoint is for us to understand the connection between the CCSS for math and parks evidence statements. I'm not going to go through the entire PowerPoint, but one of the major things that I like that's been adjusted is this, and this is a breakdown of what an evidence statement is and the characteristics of it. The first column talks about the subclaim, subclaim A. A subclaim is how rigorous we should be teaching a particular evidence statement. An evidence statement key is where the evidence statement connects to the Common Core, the benchmark or the strand, if you will, and it's saying exactly, it's giving us to what evidence or to what extent should a student be able to represent this knowledge. So it's almost like a strand, but it's more of an evidence statement, and it gives the information, a description next to it as to what they expect you to be presenting them or to be presenting that particular objective. Now, inside of the evidence statement text, sometimes they'll put the actual strand that goes with the textbook or the grade level expert, almost a GLE, but it's not a GLE. And it'll tell you exactly. You can go research further exactly what they're talking about. The clarification column where it says PBA/EOY. PBA stands for performance-based assessment, and EOY stands for end-of-year assessment. With PARC, just like they do for, or just like they've done in the past for the iLeap or whatever. They'll give you a similar constructive response type type questions. They'll start their testing in March, and that's called a PBA. And then towards the end of the year, they'll give another assessment, which is more or less a multiple choice or the fill in the blank or bubble computerized version, the end of the year assessment. Sometimes some evidence keys show up on the PBA and the EOI, which is what they're showing here. And then the math practices, that's to what level of rigor or what level of instruction you should also be teaching this. And you kind of need to refer back to your math practices, just kind of Google search a chart of that to kind of get a full concept of how they want this particular evidence key taught. And then also they've even gone further as far as including the calculator, if you're going to use it or not on that particular assessment. So these are all the parts of an evidence statement. Um, I'm not going to present all of this because you can look through this PowerPoint at your own time. One of the things that I thought was pretty cool that they've adjusted recently, I think as of December, they color coded the evidence statement. The lavender is just for the performance-based assessment only. So some people are wondering, well, what part of the evidence statement am I supposed to be getting ready for in March? And what part of it am I supposed to be getting ready for at the end of the year? And which one is going to show up on both? So they've color-coded it so that you can kind of have an idea of exactly what you're going to be presenting and when. So here's a third grade evidence statement. I'm going to include all of the evidence statements for high school, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, so that you can download your own and you can get an idea of what it's supposed to be looking like. But this is an example of that. If you don't see anything where it says related math practices, or if something's missing in the clarifications, then you can pretty much stick with the evidence statement text, which is just whatever that first column is saying to do, and it'll give you the benchmark that you're supposed to be presenting it under. So it's showing you different versions of the evidence statement. Well, it's the same version, but it's showing you when certain evidence keys are going to be assessed. Now, this was also presented earlier this year to you guys, and I wanted to kind of bring it up again. Well, here they're telling you about those subclaims, that first column of the evidence statement. Subclaim A is kind of like your very basic knowledge level or application level problems. Sometimes they'll check for fluency. Sometimes they're just checking to see if the student understands to what level they should be solving the problem. And then they'll give you a point breakdown right below it, below each one of the subclaims. Subclaim B, I want to say that's more of an application comprehension type thing, where it's more of a word problem, or they're really asking them to take something and do something else. The next level of entry level problem. Now, subclaim C and subclaim D, those are your constructive response items. Those will more often than not show up on the PBA, that performance-based assessment. So subclaim C is your reasoning. Take this material, do something else with it, justify how you know this should be or how it should not be. The constructive viable arguments and critiquing, that's what that is. And then modeling, it's more take this and model, or create a table or model something with it and make some sense of some data. But those are your next level objectives that'll show up in the PBA. And then they'll give you the total exam score also. Now, in the instructional guides that I'm going to share also, they give a breakdown exactly as far as how many points per class or per subject that it's going to be broken down on. So they're trying to be as clear as possible as far as how they're going to break down how rigorous the PARCC test is going to be. Inside of that, there are different task types. A task is basically a problem type. Type 1, again, that's more of a fluency. This chart kind of tells how they're going to test that particular task type. For subclaim A and subclaim B, more often than not, that's going to be a computerized type item. something basic. It'll be fill in the blank, those little drop down arrows for park. It'll be something like that. Type 2, a type 2 task is your reasoning task. It's construct the response, and then notice where they said math practice. So they'll tell you exactly to what level of that math practice you should be critiquing arguments and teaching under. And notice type 2 and type 3 are going to be under the PBA assessment. I think it is saying here that it could be either a paper-based test or a computerized test. So I think right now, more often it's going to be a hand-scored test for type 2 and type 3 whenever they decide to do that. I know they're doing that for middle school and elementary. And as far as the language type, some language is straightforward, some is derived from material where the students have to do a little bit more with it. Um, I don't really want to get into all of that. I'll let you research that on your own. But they're showing you how the language inside of the task item has certain verbiage that some is exactly what it needs to be, and then some you have to kind of take it and do a little extra with it. The next part of this presentation that I want to talk about is the informational guides. These are kind of new, not really, but they're kind of syncing all of those different documents that are floating around out there that you guys haven't seen, and they've kind of condensed it into one informational guide, almost like a content framework. But it kind of guides you in terms of the breakdown of the part test. So in the beginning of the of this document, again, they're showing you the breakdown for Algebra 1 for the different subclaims and how they're going to assess them. So there's a total of 97 points. Then they show you again how they're going to assess the different task types inside of that document. Then they give you the blueprint for the test. This is how they're going to do Algebra 1. On the left, this is the performance-based assessment, whenever they give it. Not the EOC, this is for part. So you notice that the type 1 task, there are 10 questions that have a total of 10 points. The type 2 task, well, type 2, that was our subclaim C. Well, they're given a breakdown of that particular subclaim for type 2. And it looks like there's a type 3 also. They're telling you about the modeling questions. So there may be 2 questions that have a total of 6 points. Now, inside of those 2 questions, it may be 3 parts. It may be a part 1, 2, or 3. And then there could be another type 3 question that's worth 6 points. So it could be each question is 6 points apiece. So it's given a breakdown as far as how they're going to do the test. So if it were me and I'm preparing for the performance-based assessment, yeah, I would be worrying about or preparing for part 2 and part 3. And then, of course, there's the end of the year test, which most of those are type 1 tests. Those are mostly entry-level tests, very basic, multiple choice items. So most of that will show up on the end of the year test. So it's no different than an ILEAP or an EOC as done in the past. They're going to give you constructive response, and then they're going to give you the multiple choice version of it. Now, this is the evidence statement as it was mentioned in that PowerPoint earlier, only this is for Algebra 1. Now you notice the lavender. I'm not a color guy. I think this is purple. Either way, lavender. You notice the subclaim, it's color coded, and it'll show you in the first column subclaim A. And we know subclaim A is the entry level problems. So these particular strands here are going to be very basic. And then they're showing that it's on the PBA. And then they're showing us the math practice to what level of rigor we need to be teaching that evidence text. And then you'll note, okay, sorry, I had a little bit of computer malfunction, so I'll just kind of pick up where I left off. I just want to point out that the calculator usage was also mentioned here as well. So if you're talking about the end of the year assessment and they're saying part of this test will not use a calculator, well, you know exactly what's going to be there and what's not. This was not on the evidence statements at the beginning of the year from over the summer. It was revised in December, so it looks a whole lot more coherent. So when you think of an evidence statement, I want you to think of more of a comprehensive curriculum that gives us an idea of how we should be teaching and what we should be teaching to, because that's something that has not been present since they threw out the comprehensive curriculum. I also wanted to mention that as I continue with the rest of this presentation. Um, so one of the things I wanted to point out was that subclaim A, if it's on the performance-based assessment, there are a few of those items that will show up. So, for instance, the first subclaim or the first evidence statement says, find the solutions where the graphs of the equations y equals f of x and y equals g of x intersect, using technology to graph the functions, make tables of values, or find successive approximations. And they're also going to limit f of x and g of x to linear and quadratic functions. So what we're supposed to do in that clarification, in that section, it says the explain part of standard AREI 11 is not assessed here. So whatever that particular benchmark or strand is, they're saying you're not supposed to be using that for this aspect of the standard. So they said see subclaim C for that particular for further explanation. Now, so if I'm reading that, what it tells me is that I'm looking to find solutions of where something's intersecting. So I would give students either two linear equations to graph, or I would give them a quadratic function as well as a linear equation, or any variation of that. And I'm just trying to figure out where are they intersecting. Now, can they use a calculator on this particular part? Yes, they can. So if we have graphing calculators, it says it right there that they can use that. And that's hopefully, I don't know if that's going to show up on a computer or not, but if so, it is so many different variations of that subclaim. So those are the things that we need to get from the evidence statement as we're preparing to teach our instruction. One last thing that I want to mention, and I'll be brief about this one, is a few task items that were shared with me from 7th and 8th grade in terms of talking about task types and how many points that would be allotted for each question. This question here, they didn't tell me how many points a question like this would be, but it has a part A and a part B. But inside part A, they say determine a certain amount of a payment, and then they say show your work and explain. So to me, that's a two-part question. So that's going to be two parts there. And then part B, well, it has four different bullets. So I would think that's a 4 points right there for each bullet. So together, that's a 6-point constructive response item. It's a lot of reasoning, and you're using everything from that same particular thing. Here's another example of one that they're saying is a 3-point question. I only see 2 bullets, so I'm not sure if this is a typo or not, but you can read it on your own time. It's more or less a rate of change, and you're comparing something, so that's 2 parts. So I would think this is also under critiquing and explaining. And finally, this is a 7th grade question that they're saying is a 4-point question. So one of the things that came up was they're locating 5/4 on this number line, and they said, well, can the students write where 5/4 would show up? And on the number line to use it as part of the explanation, and they said no. One of the things is that they have to stay below where it says explain. That's where they need to explain. So if it's on the test, or if they have like a box, they have to show their work there to justify why it's there. They can't just use the model. They have to actually write out what they did to come up with that explanation. So that's all I have on evidence statements. I'm expecting your feedback. I want to see how this is. I know sometimes I talk a little faster when we're in public, or sometimes it's more of a day that we're all trying to hurry up and rush out. So I thought this would be easier to view, which would be at your own time. And if you press pause or you wanted to press rewind and go back and look at it, I just thought this would be a different format for you guys to use and converse with me. If you see me in the hallway, tell me how it went. If not, thank you for listening, and I'll see if I can come up with something else that may not have been explained or that I may not have shared. Thank you.